Hi, I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rihanna, and welcome back to Fresh Off the Broke.
Fresh Off the Broke is about personal experiences growing up Asian American in a predominantly white community, Asian media, and Asian pop culture in general. Race has always been a sensitive topic. Every day there are debates over race. With our podcast, we intend to shed light on the experiences of first-generation Asian immigrants, not put them on a pedestal.
We understand that race isn't everything, but there should be an acknowledgement of people of color, the knowledge gap, and the racial divide that will ideally be broken. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into the episode. Today we are going to be discussing accurate Asian representation in literature. That is a mouthful.
Say that 3 times fast.
I probably couldn't.
Okay, accurate representation.
So we're going to start by talking about bad representation and then move on to more accurate representation. Luckily, we've been given the opportunity by Kaya Press to discuss a book by Ed Lin. So stay tuned for the interview later in the episode.
Well, now you have to listen to the whole thing. So do it.
We're going to link Ed and Kaya Press in the description. So please check them out. Amazing people.
So, first up, how white authors write Asian characters. So for that, we decided to focus on the book Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell, which the two of us read a few years ago in English.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
We were picked on, well, not picked on, but we were the token Asians, and we were asked about our perspective on the book, which, yikes.
And then, not to go into a tangent, but our teacher asked us for our opinion on the representation and then proceeded to disagree with us.
Yeah.
So, don't ask. Don't want an honest answer.
Also, the writer is a white lady. Just
And if you're wondering about that English teacher, yes he was. Do you want to start us off with why this book is problematic?
Sure. So this book is about a half white, half Korean boy named Park. Just let that sink in for a little bit, and Eleanor. And to give credit where credit is due, this book is it's a pretty interesting book. The main character isn't Park. Well, they're both the main character, but there's more conflict on Eleanor's side of the story, which is completely different from, the racial perspective. So we're not talking about that at all. But Park, the way that he is described and just the way that his character acts throughout the book is seen as very anti-Asian in a way. It's almost as if he doesn't validate his Asian side. And there are just a lot of generalist comments on Park's mom, who is the Korean one, and Park himself. Like, there's a lot of self-hatred about being Asian. He doesn't really think he's, attractive because of his Asian side. And just the way he's described is very iffy, to say the least.
Here we have a quote. I believe it's in Eleanor's perspective. And it goes like this. Park's eyes go wide. Well, sort of wide. Sometimes she wondered if the shape of his eyes affected how he saw things. That was probably the most racist question of all time. I gotta say, I agree with that last line. That's probably the most racist question of all time.
Also,
does your eye shape change how you see things, Rihanna?
Well, maybe this is because I'm influenced by the people around me, but I've actually questioned that.
We should actually do an experiment on this episode, on this not website, podcast.
I mean, I just think it's weird that she says that at the end. Like, she had to add that part at the end because, I don't know. I guess it's her being self-aware, but if you're going to be self-aware, why did you need to bring that up in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, we don't personally know Rainbow Rowell, but part of me feels like she was trying to dignify.
Yeah, for sure.
Whole thing just now.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
It's not funny either.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Well, sort of wide.
I feel like the people in our class when we read this like kind of giggled at this part, but
Oh, I definitely remember people laughing.
yeah, I just why if you're gonna stick to her saying something like that, just don't add the self-awareness at the end. I don't get it.
Be racist.
Yeah.
It's easier for us. Just be racist. Honestly. Okay. Actually, a book I read this year for culminating had a really weird quote about quote unquote chinky eyes. Not the book is called Kamouraska by Anne Hébert. It's set in Quebec, and it's basically just about this woman looking back on her life as her husband's dying. She's looking back on her previous abusive husband and then an affair that she had with her doctor while she was with that abusive husband. It's not my place to judge this book. I'm not going to do that. But there was just this quote that seemed really out of place for a book that doesn't have anything to do with Asians.
Yeah.
And it goes like this. So the main character, oh shoot, what's her name? I'm forgetting. What's her name?
This is proof that Tiffany didn't read the book for culminating. I'm kidding. I'm
My
kidding.
God.
I do that. You don't do that.
Really?
I'm the one that does that.
Her name is Elizabeth. Okay. The main character, Elizabeth, is describing a maid. She's kind of a maid, kind of not a maid. Just this girl that's in their house.
Just this girl that's in their house. What?
Yeah, this is the person that she's describing. And she said her little wrinkled face with slits for eyes.
I've heard that one before.
Relatable. The thing is that when I read this, there wasn't any mentions of there being an Asian character. I mean, if this was their way of saying it, then it's awful.
Yeah.
But they never mentioned that there were Asian characters in the story that was taking place in Quebec. But it's just, why did you write it like that? Her little wrinkled face with slits for eyes. Her little wrinkled face. That's also unnecessary. What do you mean?
Yeah.
If I recall, which I actually do remember this time, the girl is really young, like the one that's like working at their house or something. She's pretty young. She's like a young lady. And so I wouldn't understand why they had to say her little wrinkled face. Because it's definitely not an indicator of age or anything.
What a weird.
But yeah, Asians being caricatures. Cool.
I think just us associating that line, not even knowing the race, but associating that line with people stereotyping is just an indicator of what literature is like.
Yeah, because we don't know if she's actually Asian. She might not be, but just because we saw that and because we're so used to hearing things like that, we're just like, she's describing an Asian character?
Yeah.
Is that your poor attempt at, I don't know. Do you have anything else to add on that?
Not really. I mean,
You mentioned something about Park's mom.
Oh, Park's mom. Oh, yeah. In the book, the way that they describe Park's mom, let me get a quote from the book. Give me a sec. When Eleanor was little and her mom read her the story, Eleanor had thought the dainty China people were Chinese, but they were actually ceramic, or they'd turn ceramic if you tried to sneak one back to Kansas. Eleanor imagined Park's dad, Tom Selleck, tucking his dainty China person into his flak jacket and sneaking her out of Korea. Now, when we first read the book, that really struck me, that whole part struck me with like yellow fever vibes. Plug in, go watch our episode on yellow fever.
Yes.
But did you feel the same way? Like,
that was just unnecessarily descriptive.
Yeah.
Tucking his, one thing I really didn't like was tucking a dainty china person into
Yeah.
his jacket as if he owned her and she was just this doll. Well, I mean, they did,
Compare her to a doll.
yeah. But just the way that was said, his dainty china person, like, I don't know, a purse or some type of doll or a pet. Like, oh, I'm just like tucking in, I don't know, like a pen behind your ear, like something very casual like that.
Yeah. Also, if I'm remembering correctly, because this is like it's jogging my memory, but I just remember there were so many scenes of like Park's dad protecting his mom, and the mom like not being able to fend for herself as a Asian woman, an Asian immigrant, and like Park's dad being white savior, you know?
Yeah, that's that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Again, we don't
Stay
know.
tuned for a different episode.
Yeah, we don't know Rainbow Rowell, but if those were her, like, it's possible that that was not her intention. But considering that race is a very touchy subject, you need to be careful when you word things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. The book is pretty vulgar in how it describes the plot, like, besides Park, like, Eleanor's situation, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
I agree with what you said and how these things might not be her intention and she was probably just not doing her research, which you should do with an author. But it's just that there were so many parts in the book that were just really off, just especially with Park. And you know, like the whole mom thing, it's just these details. If it happened only once, then maybe it was just an oversight. But then you have the wide eye thing and then weird references about being Chinese outside of the China doll thing.
Yeah.
It was a repetitive thing in the book, and it was just the wrong way to represent Asian people.
Yeah.
Because if you're not an Asian author and you're gonna be writing about Asian people, you can't just give them an Asian name and then take 3 stereotypes and put them together. You have to actually read about the culture.
Yeah.
Why they do certain things. You have to understand the mannerism. Because, for example, I don't know, if you just I can't think of an example, but if you just write a character with an Asian name and then you make them act inaccurately, I don't want to say act white because that sounds more like a whole you're whitewash thing. But if you made them with the personality of a white person, then that's kind of just what's the point?
Yeah.
You know what
Like,
I mean?
besides the whole, like, because a lot of people nowadays just want to have ethnic characters integrated into the stories without trying to make a big deal about it, which I get because it's like we need representation and we need representation where it's just we're actually part of society. You're not like a token ethnic friend, you know? But
Yeah.
what was I gonna say? I think it's the problem with it is that there's such a big emphasis on like well, especially because they teach it in schools, there's a really big emphasis on Park, like his identity of being half Asian. But this book does not accurately represent it. So why is there such a big emphasis on that part? Like from how it comes across is like Park hates being half Asian, and that's it. Like there's no resolution.
Mhm. But yeah, we don't hate Rainbow Rowell. We just think that she could have done better.
Yeah. I mean, we can't really do anything about it. It's just a lot of people are talking about it now because apparently there's going to be a movie, which, oh god.
When we should do a movie review, that's gonna be the update.
Yeah, that would be fun actually.
I'm writing that down.
So, is there anything else we want to talk about for bad representation besides it's everywhere?
Hey guys, it's Editing Rihanna here. So, we were talking about the Eleanor and Park movie, And so the tweet that is on the screen right now, if you're watching the YouTube version, says someone asked Rainbow Rowell herself, is the Eleanor and Park movie still happening? And Rainbow Rowell replied, it's no longer in development. The rights are back with me. So yeah, the movie actually isn't happening. Okay, that's all I have to say. Go back to the episode.
No, I think we can move on.
Okay, so now talking about accurate Asian representation, we have a very good example. We are pre-recording this, but the book will be out now. The book is called David Tung Can't Get a Girlfriend Until He Gets into an Ivy League College? ?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Okay.
I didn't say Ivy League University, it says Ivy League College.
Yeah. We are Canadian, so we use university, but that is not the case.
No, we have colleges here.
Well, I mean, but like Ivy League colleges.
I think people just use. I feel like some people just use the terms interchangeably.
Yeah, they use it
unrelated. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. But this book. Do you want to read a little blurb about it?
Yeah, sure. I'll read what's on the back of the book. Okay, here goes. I'll try not to mess up. David Tung is a Chinese-American high school student who works in a family restaurant, competes for top rank at his upscale Asian-majority suburban New Jersey high school, and hangs with his real friends at weekend Chinese school in NYC's working-class Chinatown. When popular girl Christina Tao asks David to the high school Dame dance, David's tightly regimented life gets thrown into a tailspin. He soon realizes that he actually has feelings for Betty, the smartest girl at Chinese school. But as his mother reminds him, he's not allowed to have a girlfriend. Should he defy his mother and go to the dance, or defy Christina's wishes and spend Saturday night studying for the MCAT?
Having read the book, first of all, we really enjoyed the book.
Yeah.
I think I cried at a part. No spoilers, but I cried reading it. I think it's just because it hits very close to home. Well, yeah. For me, not as much like relatableness because I'm not Chinese. I'm Filipino, but just the whole thing about like identity and the parents thing is very similar. So I can relate on that level.
Yeah, especially I don't know what we're allowed to mention or we're not allowed to mention. I don't want to quote parts from the book, but there were references to the whole working class Chinese family thing, and that was just a little personal, man. Ed, if you're listening to this right now, that was mean.
But yeah, I think this book, the fact that we were so touched by it and we not feel attacked, but feel attacked by the book, it just goes to show how accurate this is.
Yeah, especially since we're around the same age as David Tung would be.
We are literally going through the problem that he is going through of university. Oh,
just a clarification for people that may not know, MCAT stands for Medical College Admission Test.
God. Yeah, well, in terms of plot, there's nothing crazy. Like, it's not like Eleanor and Park YA novel. Well, it's a different type of YA novel. Eleanor and Park talks about these issues, other issues, which it's not that that's a special case. It's that that's something that happens, but no one ever talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more common that people know. But this is a different type of YA novel. It's more like regular everyday life specific to, like general Asian teenage kids,
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. And the interesting take on romance with this book was that even in the romantic part, there was a struggle with identity, being Chinese-American, because if I remember correctly, Betty was perceived as kind of whitewashed, I think.
Yeah.
At least there was this one part where Christina attacked Betty and said that she was like,
Half greed.
yeah, that's what she said. And I thought it was a nice touch because even in the parts with the love interest, well, I guess love interest because it was kind of like a love triangle. It wasn't lost just like in the moment. There was still David was still thinking about these things, you know.
Yeah.
Which is accurate to real life because for Asians, I mean, this is a generalized statement. Not everyone has all these things on their mind all the time, but it's just that with people of color in general, sometimes when you're dating, like maybe even outside your race, you have to think about like, oh, like how are we gonna get along because of like culture, language barriers, stuff like that. Something that a lot of people are really hyper aware of.
Yeah. Also, it's really important that he brings up the fact that Betty is seen as different from the rest of them because she's half white. Like, it's good to acknowledge that there is not racism, but like, I guess racism kind of, because half people, yeah, mixed children are usually seen as they're not white and they're not Asian. Like, they're not white enough and they're not Asian enough.
Yeah, especially if you're more mixed, not just half and half. If you're
Yeah.
like one this, one third that, then people kind of just, well, you're mixed.
Yeah.
You're not this or that. You're kind of just this thing.
Yeah, and also it's really great to see Betty as such a strong character, being a mixed girl herself, because usually the mixed people. Wow, they're portrayed as like, oh, I don't know about my identity. Like that's the only thing about their character. But Betty was such a complex character, and it was great to read.
Yeah, she was confident in herself. She knew what she wanted to do.
I was just gonna say, like, Betty, she was also like considered, she had the best grades in Chinese school, or she was like the smartest kid in Chinese school.
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
essentially better than the full Chinese kids at Chinese.
Yeah, they bring that up a lot also, which was good.
Another thing that I liked about this book is that while it was very serious and it brought up very serious issues, there were funny parts and, you know, like comic relief.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't feel forced. Once in a while you'd have a joke or maybe a remark and it was very relatable to, you know, an Asian kid.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know, it's kind of similar to our sense of humor, at least the way we talk about things on the podcast.
I think one thing that I found funny and relatable, which I'll explain later, was the fact that the one white kid in the story, like full white kid, was the outcast.
Yeah, I know.
Like, obviously, it's always the Asian outcast, but this white, like, he wanted, oh, spoiler, I'm not gonna say that, never mind. But he was the outcast because he was white.
Yeah. I mean, and that actually happened. I have friends that go to predominantly Asian schools, and I mean, the white kids don't get made fun of, but they're the minority at the school,
Yeah.
which is very, very interesting to think about.
Yeah. Also,
'Cause that doesn't usually happen.
yeah. Um, my relation to this is no way trying to say anything about race. Disclaimer.
Okay.
But when I was in the gifted program, it was majority Asian kids, like South Asian kids,
Yeah.
majority South Asian kids, and then white people were the minority in that class or in that program. So I also relate to that part, but I just found it funny.
No, yeah, I like that irony.
Another important topic in this book was, tiger parent type things.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a whole, well, the tiger parent part kind of ties into the whole rich kid versus not poor kid. struggle, but that's kind of how it was.
Classism?
Yeah. Like, the book didn't just focus on the less well-off kids' problems and portray the rich kids as, perfect, they have everything they need.
Mm-hmm.
They showed both sides.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because you would have the uptown kids versus the Chinatown kids. And I don't necessarily mean that in a fight, but there was a very clear class struggle that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because even on the back of the book, I'm using the back of the book because I'm trying not to give spoilers. But it says, hangs out at his upscale age majority suburb in New Jersey high school, and then hangs with his real friends at Chinese school in Chinatown. It's because David isn't well off himself, but he goes to a very nice upscale high income school.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then his real friends are in the working class Chinatown because that's what he relates to. That's his life.
Mm.
And I mean, even in real life, that's the thing because there's a lot of people that fake addresses so that they can let their kids go to nicer schools.
Yeah.
Like, this might be a tangent, but there's a comedian / actor, Jimmy O Yang. His parents came up with a fake address so that he could go to Beverly Hills High School. That's a thing. People do that.
Yeah.
I know people that do that. Well, maybe not Beverly Hills, but
I mean, I almost did. Well, my parents almost did that for me going into high school. They wanted me to go to a high school like farther north, and they were gonna use a different address. I don't know. I can't remember what the benefits were, but they wanted to use.
I can't remember what the benefits were.
Because I can't think of benefits for this specific school. I think maybe it had to do with like bus fare or something. Like they would provide you with bus fare back when a certain age still needed, whatever.
Yeah, I get it.
But I didn't go to that school anyway, so.
They're lost. I mean, if you did go to that school, then we wouldn't have this podcast, so.
It's true.
Not to be sentimental, but like.
Stop. Don't make me cry.
Like the book did.
That pretty much sums up all our thoughts on the book. But
10 out of 10 would read again.
Yes, very true. I can't wait till the hard copies come out.
I know.
We do have more questions, but we discussed those questions in our interview with Ed, which we should insert right now.
Welcome to the long-awaited interview segment.
We definitely filmed this at the same time as the last segment. Nothing sus. Everything is organized.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the interview. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, no. As we mentioned earlier and on our social medias, we had the honor of interviewing the author of this book, Ed Lin.
So, Ed, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Ed Lin. I'm a writer of Taiwanese and Chinese descent, native New Yorker. I'm married. My wife is Cindy Chung, who is an actress, and I have a 7-year-old son.
Hey.
I live in Brooklyn, of course.
Well, thank you for being on our podcast.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure.
Okay, so we prepared a set of questions that are related to the book and also some themes that we thought were related to the story and Asian American issues in general.
Okay.
So, Rihanna, would you like to?
Sure. So, as you know, Ivy season gets more hectic and competitive with every year. So what are your thoughts on Asian kids from less affluent families that can't afford to consider Ivy League schools?
Well, actually, the thing is that a lot of Ivy League schools, I don't know if all of them have, if your household income is below a certain threshold, I think it's free. I think you still have to meet, the cost of living or something, but they probably have grants for that as well. I mean, they have tried to even the playing field a bit, not so much to target Asians who are less affluent, but to reach in and pull in people who are like the first of their generations to attend college. Other pioneers within their own families. I know, when you talk about Asian Americans who go to these elite schools, it's pretty easy to come up with like this kind of monolithic block. But Asians are like so diverse. We're like the entire economic and political spectrum as well. And certain demographics are very well represented already. Others, not so much. I mean, we need more Hmong. We need more Southeast Asians,
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Have you heard about Harvard and their anti-Asian kind of controversy?
They're supposed anti-Asian. Okay, I think that what the court decided was that I mean, this whole lawsuit is like so messed up because it was filed by this guy who wasn't even Asian. He's like this guy who's like trying to break down all racial preferences, and he had filed that suit. I believe it was against the University of Texas system because there was this white girl who claimed that she didn't get in because she was white. So this is a guy who's really has genuine purposes, and unfortunately, a number of Asian American organizations like jumped on this, like Harvard's racist. They're keeping us out and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the face of it, it's like there are more Asians in America every year, right? And yet the Asian population has stayed about the same. At the elite schools. Again, I would say as long as this monolithic block of Asians is changing, I think it's okay that the current percentage or whatever, which it seems to be about 20, 22, 23%, as long as there's a wider range of Asians coming in. And, one thing, okay, speaking from my Taiwanese and Chinese heritage, I can say that, okay, education is like such a paramount thing that parents want for their kids and everything. It's like pretty much the most important thing. I mean, you have immigrant families here in New York City who spend half the household income on like prep tests, ready to get into the public schools that provide that are very selective. So so there's this fixation on the Ivy League and other elite schools because of course MIT is not an Ivy League school, and yet and I heard of some place called Stanford, but I don't know. I don't know if that place really exists. But so there's this fixation that you have to go to the best school to get on the correct path to life. And there is only one correct path to life. Any deviation from my 500-point plan will result in your utter failure, So, I mean, I feel like that has driven a lot of the Asians applying to these elite schools. I mean, that whole fixation is that is a myth in itself. In the end, it doesn't really matter where you go to school. It's like you look at the people who do like tech companies and stuff, and a lot of the times it's like people you met in high school, and you're kind of experimenting with stuff, and then you go to college, and then you end up dropping out of college because this thing that you guys came up with as teenagers is like pretty awesome. Look at Bill Gates,
Mm-hmm.
at Microsoft, or Steve Jobs, who never went to college seriously. There are all kinds of paths that are open and available to you in the U.S. And in Canada as well, that aren't necessarily don't require like that seal or that diploma from these elite schools, even though your parents may not believe that.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that last part.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So the next question is more directly related to your book, as we found that this was a reoccurring theme. So what are your thoughts on the connection between problem kids and tiger parents? Do you believe that there's a connection?
There's this woman. She is a journalist, and she teaches journalism as well. Her name's Betty Ming Liu. And in response to the whole Tiger Mom thing, like there was that book, that awful book from that awful woman called, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom. Betty Ming Liu wrote this blog entry called Tiger Moms Are the Reason Why I'm in Therapy.
Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to come from a society where everybody is like hammered the same way by the previous generation. At least you have the community, your peers, who all are going through the same thing, and you can commiserate and like find ways to cope with that. If you're in the US and like there are very few Asians around, and like so most people don't understand what you're going through, that can be an extremely alienating kind of experience. For me, I was almost always the only Asian anywhere. I mean, my book is a lot different because it's like, Asian majority schools. And my reason for writing it that way was like, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to dignify this, white supremacist racism shit. I just want to talk about problems that we have within our own community. I want to talk about ourselves,
Period.
the issues that we have with different classes of, within the greater Chinese community, the Chinese diaspora, and the sort of, communities that we choose to live in. David himself is from, he's living in this suburb that's become this really exclusionary, the opposite of the Chinese Exclusion Act. Exclusionary. And then he goes into Manhattan, and he's with working class Chinese in this Chinese school.
Yeah, we actually really liked how you explored the Chinatown kids versus the upper class night school kids. Because that's not something that people often bring up. People usually, when they think of Chinese kids in school, they think of, the ones that are brought up in an affluent family, they do well on the SATs, they go to Harvard, and then that's it. But then because you explore the difference between the Chinatown kids and the uptown kids, it shows the struggle that people have just beyond grades in general, which we like. So a follow-up question to that would be, how do you think that the problem kids tiger parents thing is related to the Asian burnout phenomenon in your book?
Wait, what is the Asian burnout phenomenon?
Well, the Asian burnout phenomenon, I mean, that's not necessarily the formal name for it. I guess that's what we like to call it. But basically, you have these kids that are almost forced to be these perfect robots, 4.0 GPA, AP classes.
Yeah.
And then up until a certain point in their life, which I'm pretty sure this happened to David as well in the book, he started questioning if it was worth it, or if he should start doing other things. and then started having these quote unquote impure thoughts.
Huh. Like the like actually, moving on from being a robot, and then like all of a sudden like you're a real person. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Um oh man. I mean, I can't help but think about this guy. I actually wrote about him in one of my short stories, but when I was a kid, you always have your parents speaking to other people of their own generation, and my mother was telling me about this other kid who was like this genius, and she was like, his mother says he's going to win the Nobel Prize.
Oh God.
Yeah. So this kid actually he went to Caltech, and
Oh.
yeah. So now you're impressed. So he finished his bachelor's degree in like 3 years, and then finished his master's in like another year, and then he started hearing voices,
Oh.
like a
Oh, I
sign
did
of,
not expect this to turn us
yes, like a sign of schizophrenia. And then he moved back home, and he like lived in the basement of his parents' house for like the next decade or so. And of course, then my mother stopped talking about him and how great he was, in order to pressure me into being great or whatever.
Mm.
But you think about these kids who are being driven to excel, and it's easy to think that they are somehow gifted by their race, that they're doing really well, but there's an incredible human cost to it.
Mhm.
There's incredible denial that becomes self-denial, that can manifest its ways in that, David has it hammered in his head so much that he can't have a girlfriend until he gets into an Ivy League college, and he doesn't even think about it until one day this girl asks him to the dance, and it kind of wrecks him because he just never thought anybody would ask him.
Mhm.
He knew he wasn't going to
Mhm.
ask anyone, but then when that's kind of turned on him, he's like, oh. Have you guys read that book 1984 by George Orwell?
I've heard of it.
Okay, you've heard of it.
I've heard of it too.
It's funny
Our English
because,
teachers have not assigned it.
okay, well, lucky you. But in 1984, it's a future, even though it's like so many years in the past now, the whole idea of 1984 is that it takes part in this bleak, futuristic, joyless kind of world. And there's this guy, we follow him, he's going through his routine, and like he's okay. Like he can deal with it, he can cope with it, he can function in this world. And then one day, this woman hands him this note, and he opens this note. This note says, "I love you."
Oh.
And all of a sudden, he's like,
Oh.
"What?" And so, like, and then his world is like shattered, and he can't function there anymore. And he's just like dying in this oppression. It was definitely an influence on this book.
Mhm. She had tiger parents, and she ended up hiring hitmen to kill them.
You know what? I feel like I've heard that story before. I mean, from like years ago.
Mm.
Does,
Yeah,
does
it
the
might be
name
the same.
Jennifer? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Does the name Jennifer Pan ring a bell?
It doesn't, but no, but I mean it does sound familiar. I mean, anytime anytime I read about like elder abuse, like I read about someone who's like beating their parents, I was like, man, that's like an Asian dude. And like it'll turn out to be some Asian dude who had been pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed by his
Yep.
parents for
Yep.
years and years, and then one day he'd snap and just go off. Unfortunately, suicide is a pretty big thing in
Yeah.
our community, the larger
Mhm.
diaspora. I mean, my own cousin killed himself,
Oh.
and he had been in a very similar situation to me, in that his parents ran a hotel, which is like a 24-hour kind of business. So he grew up in that as well. He's like pressured to go to like all these elite schools and everything. But yeah, it's very unfortunate, and I just want to talk about it. You know, any opportunity I do with young people.
Mhm.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Oh, it was quite a while ago, but thank you so much.
No, things like that. That's very relatable for the two of us.
Don't expose us like
Well,
I can't. Sorry.
that. But yeah, we
That's,
like to
that's
talk
as much as
about
I would
that.
say.
Yeah, we think it's super important bringing that up, especially in the podcast, because it's very, no one likes to talk about it,
No.
especially Asians.
yeah,
Mhm.
but
Even
that's
though
one of
it's
the
every
problems.
kid. Yep.
Well, the problem is no one wants to talk about it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Ugh.
It can be hard to bring up things like that, especially since you buried it for so long.
Yeah,
Huh. Yes.
I agree.
Well, I just want to say that if there's anyone out there who's feeling alone and a little lost, that there are people who can help, and that there's always a way back.
Mhm. Well, awkward transition, kind of. But we have another question.
But hey, being Asian is all about the awkward.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
Oh God, everything.
Painful.
Yes.
Okay, so in the book, there were several instances where David smoked with his friends. Was
Yes.
this a reference to Asians and social smoking?
Social smoking. By social smoking, you mean people who do not smoke regularly except to just hang out and
Mhm.
do it.
Yeah.
With their friends,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, I guess in a way. It's you know, when you're young, one way of kind of feeling young is by harming yourself by, you know, smoking or doing drugs or
Mhm.
doing crazy stunts with crazy selfies and trying to.
Oh.
You can only truly feel young when you're defying death, because youth is like this eternal kind of thing.
That's true.
Yeah, yeah.
They call it the golden year.
To go. Well, I would also say that, like, man, smoking definitely less so in recent years, but for a long time, man, everybody was smoking in Chinatown.
Mhm. Now everyone's juuling.
Yeah, I guess so, but not flavored jewels.
Mm.
Okay, so this next question. Generally speaking, most Chinese parents look down on jobs and professions relating to the arts. However, the arts play a large role in Chinese culture. Why do you think that is?
I feel like you know, I mean, Chinese culture is all about art. You know, even in the homes of these tiger parents, you still have paintings hanging on the wall. You still have scrolls with, you know, the Chinese characters, which in themselves are paintings. And like, you know, you get these parents who are trading like bootleg DVDs, you know, sending each other viruses through email. And you know, the one thing is, like, if you want to play this Confucian hardball, you know, don't be selective about Confucian values. You know, take the whole thing.
True.
You know, one of Confucius's lessons supposedly was that it's someone who doesn't understand poetry isn't worth listening to because they don't know what they're saying. You know, you know, you want to be this hardcore education thing, well, let's do the poetry thing too. You know, one thing of proving your academic worth was being able to compose poems on the spot. So, you know, let's hear it, parents. You know, where's your freaking poem?
Period.
I'm glad you brought that up. This is a slight side tangent, but a lot of Chinese parents, I mentioned this in a previous episode, but they like to compare situations to certain Chinese proverbs or idioms. And I don't know, you say, where's your poetry? That reminded me of that.
Yeah, where's your improvised poem? Don't tell me something you memorized, because that's like fake.
Oh,
because like you know, there are contests. It's like okay, compose a poem. You know, three of us will say random lines from a movie, from a different movie, and then you compose the fourth line like on your own. And this happens in like classical Chinese novels as well. Like characters like try to goad each other in this way. I think, okay, it was something in the immigrant community is like, you want to prove that you know, you came to the States or to Canada or you immigrated elsewhere and that you made it. And one of the ways of proving that you made it is that your kids are extremely wealthy or whatever. So the parents are depending on their kids to hit the wealthiest professions, and the most reliable way of doing that is by following preset paths to like pre-law, pre-med, and then law and med, and then lawyer and doctor careers and everything. I mean, when your parents hear you say something like, you know, I want to be a writer, they hear, I'm going to be poor. And I'm going to reflect badly upon your parenting and the family name as well, you know.
It's a big thing, family name.
That's true,
Yeah.
family.
But I feel like it's a very unnatural kind of state. And I feel that within like second, third, fourth generation, this is not going to be an issue. There's going to be more Asians in the arts. You know, I don't know, one problem with representation. Yeah, I listened to your podcast on Asians in media and representation. Yeah, I listen to all your podcasts. So I feel like I know you so well. But I mean, one reason is that we need more Asians doing it, and not necessarily like getting into the big studios and everything, but starting up their own, you know. It's like, come on, we already have enough, you know, business startups. Let's have some arts startups and everything.
Yeah.
Amazon businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is true in Canada as well, but there are so many more Asian American writers now. Before, I used to be able to like buy every single Asian American book that was published per year. Now that's like impossible. So that's great.
Yeah, that's really good.
Earlier you mentioned that you graduated with a degree in mining engineering.
Yes.
How did your family react to you pursuing a career in literature?
Oh, they didn't like it.
Well, oh, really?
Okay. Yes, surprisingly. Well, you know, the thing is that I finished, my bachelor's degree is in, my undergraduate degree is in mining engineering. And then I went to journalism school for a master's. Oh. And my parents were so upset, they wouldn't even come to my graduation.
Oh.
Like, but it's funny. I graduated with my master's in journalism in '93, and the economy was doing terribly. And the only place that offered me a job was a financial news wire. And so I started working there. I started learning a lot about stocks and investing. And it's funny because being there gave me a language that I can use to speak with my father. You know, growing up, I hadn't really, you know, typical Asian dad kind of thing. Not a whole lot of communication.
Oh, no.
For some reason. Yeah, but, you know, afterwards, I could talk about stocks with him, and I still can. So that has been something really interesting. So I don't know, like Bob Marley said, when one door is closed, many more are open. So it wasn't like you know, I did like the hardcore writer thing, which was like try to get a job like Starbucks or something and like try to write furiously and try to submit short stories and stuff. I was like a bit more established because I had like a steady day job, and I was just like trying to write at night, you know. I mean, the traditional path to being published was like trying to place a short story, and then ideally you'll get a few stories, and then a collection of short stories, and then hopefully be offered a contract for a novel, like that kind of thing. I totally went about it the whole wrong way. You know, my first book is a novel, a very short novel called Waylaid, and it's based about the kind of crappy hotel that I grew up in. And I had sent it to a number of agents, and they were all like, "Oh, you're crazy if you think anyone will publish this." But the meanest people were the Asian agents, just, like, incredibly dismissive. And this one guy told me, if I wanted to see a really great story, to go watch Cider House Rules, because that's like a really great story. And it totally wasn't. So, you know, I've been a member of the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York since '92. And they had a panel called How to Get Your Book Published. And I totally went to this panel. And on this panel was Sun Young Lee, who's the editor of Kaya Press.
Oh,
wow.
So at the end of the panel, I said, "Hey, I have this crazy novel. You want to see it?" And she was like, "Okay, sure." And I sent it to her. And then she mails it back to me. And it's like my manuscript. It's got all these red lines all through it and all these remarks and stuff. And I was like, "Oh, man." And I was like so discouraged. I like threw it into like a dresser drawer. And then like I ran into her like a few weeks later. And she was like, "So what do you think?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what do I think? You hate my book." And she was like, "No, I love your book. I want to publish it." I was like, "What? Really?" So that was the start.
wow.
Oh, and a lesson for me is that people are trying to help you, and sometimes it can feel like they're attacking you. But if you really, really listen to the criticisms without an ego, you can improve yourself.
Thank you for that. That was a really interesting story, and it's nice how that helped you connect with your dad a little bit with the stuff.
Yes.
We all need a way to connect with our dads. Sorry, that's
Oh my God.
But speaking of dads,
Okay.
as a dad yourself, do you plan on passing down certain Asian traditions to your son?
Oh, man. You know, my Mandarin is terrible. It really is. I mean, actually, I think my kid may know how to read more characters than me by now. I don't know. You know, the whole thing about saying that you're Asian American, that is a political identity. And there are certain obligations in this political identity. And one is that the term Asian American was born out of the protests against the Vietnam War and greater solidarity with other people of color in the 60s and 70s. And so if you identify as Asian American, you are obligated to help other communities of color, other oppressed peoples, people of different sexualities. And so that's on you to do that. And if that's one Asian trait I'm going to pass on, it's that.
Well, thanks for tuning in today. That was a lot. We got a rant, a book review, and an interview.
Oh yeah.
Kind of crazy. Just saying. Anyway, leave a comment about a book that you thought accurately represented Asians. You know, leave some underrated Asian authors. They're probably all underrated because no one knows who they are. Tell us about a book that you thought did Asian representation wrong, did Asian characters dirty. Tell us about how much you love Ed.
If you want to find out more about us, check out the card link in our Instagram bio. It contains links to our streaming platforms such as Spotify, Anchor, Podbean, and more. Follow us for more behind-the-scenes content, announcements, and other random things we decide I put on there.
See you guys next time.
Thank you, Ed and Kai Press, for this opportunity. We're so grateful.
We hope to work with them again in the future.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Hey.
Yay.
Okay, that's enough. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Hey.
Signing out.